Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I've got great news to report. I won't need thumb surgery again. While I'll be in a brace for 2 more months, my ligament is healing and the floating bone isn't an issue. And I'm psyched. I'm also psyched for the employees at All Vail Resorts. While their management hasn't shown they can manage anything lately, they are making some positive moves, starting with a minimum of $20 per hour for employees. Now they can staff lifts and open terrain. I wonder what this is going to do to the Epic Pass pricing. But if it goes up a couple $100, they still aren't going to gouge you like the folks at Crystal Mountain are doing. So nice work, Vail. You've made my intro for something good you've done. I should also mention that bringing back HR is a no-brainer. I mean, imagine having to report something like violence in the workplace or something sexual and putting all of your trust into an app. That was a total joke, but that's what Vail's HR used to be. And Synergy? It isn't always as good as the greedy corporate executives will make you think it is, and I'm happy that they're fixing the HR situation as well. Some things are better with human interaction, and this is definitely one of them. While they have more to do, this is a great start. And now it's on to my interview this week. My guest is a guy that I've been trying to get on the show for years. A guy I both fear and respect, Jimbo Morgan. Jimbo is one of those dudes who wears his heart on his sleeve at all times. He's a straight shooter, and if you piss him off, you are off the list. Jimbo's also a legend, the only athlete I know of who was sponsored for ski, telemark skiing, and snowboarding. And he was an Olympian for speed skiing. And he's gone faster than any of my listeners, as he's been clocked at 140 miles per hour. Before we talk about all things Jimbo, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement and on Twitter at Powell Movement 1. Please share and retweet my stuff, as it really helps the show grow. I also need to thank my amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Alpine Vans. Now, let's talk with Jimbo Morgan. We're going to start about the topic that you don't want to talk about at all, because you're Jimbo Morgan. You're a tough guy. When you have problems, you don't really share them with the world. You keep them to yourself and you solve them. But what's happened to you over the past few years has to be the hardest shit you've ever gone through. You've been really sick the past few years, which really sucks. Can you let us know what was going on?
Yeah. Gosh, where to start? So my mom was a charge nurse, right? And my mom suffered from and beat colon cancer twice. So early on at 35, I started having colonoscopies just because it was something that we knew was kind of hereditary, but we didn't have any like total concrete just at that time.
Sure.
And so, I'm 35, then 40, 45, colonoscopies coming back clean, no problems there. And scheduled my colonoscopy when I was 55-ish, 54-ish, went in for my colonoscopy and nothing felt right from the minute I got there. And I went through the process. I was in the waiting room after my colonoscopy, and the doctor was speaking to me very vaguely, and it was like, I wasn't sure what he was saying, and it was directed at me. And he says, we found polyps and we found a couple growths. I've tattooed them, and I want you to come back in 6 months. And everything I knew about colonoscopy is we remove the polyps and what are the bumps? So long story short, I didn't sleep for probably like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate. Someone who's very high up at Stanford Medicine. And so I have that access, right? I guess is the easiest way to say it. So I picked up the phone and I called my friend, and I was down there that afternoon, and I sat and got a consultation. And then the next day I had to go get blood test, MRI, and come back. And so they were going to gather the information from my last colonoscopy and then, do an assessment. And when I got down there, the assessment wasn't good. And it was one of those things like you kind of always fear. And then getting blood tests, going through the whole 9. That was, I believe, a Tuesday afternoon, and the following Monday I was being operated on. So I was floored, and I'm a father now, and I have a wife. And so it's like, you never expect anything like this. You're just carrying on. And I think the first things kind of out of my mouth where I don't have time for this. I'm deep involved with not even thinking about myself really. And I'm thinking about my kid mostly. So I went in, had a 6-hour surgery, and then I've been under the care of Stanford Medicine ever since. During that time, I also had a big flare up with nerve damage. And I think it's from maybe coming up short on a couple landings or just the wear and tear over the years and, beating on my body where my feet were starting to go to sleep.
Huh.
I guess the easiest way for me to explain it so maybe everyone else could equate or give them an analogy is that if you sat in a chair or maybe sat on the toilet too long and your legs went to sleep and you kind of have that tingling sensation.
Yeah.
Well, I was getting that in my feet, but it wasn't wearing off, so to speak. It was like my feet stayed asleep, and then it was just getting worse and really bad in my left leg. So I started seeing neurologists, and then I saw a cavalcade of doctors. And then because I had such great access, which I'm so fortunate and lucky, they started finding more things. And it was like, in one sense, you're like, God, Stanford, you're so good. Quit finding all this stuff. It's crushing me over here. But at the same time, you meet all these super compassionate people who are so brilliant, right? I mean, they're talking and you're just like, they are so smart. And I just listened. And I also, with that going on, it was mentally so tough. And I'm not so tough that I can't not have that thick of skin that I can't ask for help. And so I started seeking some help on the psychological side because I was starting to deal with depression, the what ifs, negative thought, and it really can overtake you very quickly.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, I'm feeling like I'm drowning in this shit. So that being said, I've had all kinds of therapy on that end. And from essentially about 3.5 years ago, just a little over 3.5 years ago, I've had 9 surgeries.
Oh, shit. And are they nerve related or is it cancer related?
Dude, that's just the whole thing. It was like from the early colonoscopy to experimental stuff that they were putting in my legs as far as crazy wires. It's neuropathy and they're trying to awaken the nerves. And then some of those things didn't work. They failed. And then it's been back and forth and back and forth. And then, of course, COVID hit. So it was that's when things were really I was checkmated, I guess, everything came to a stop. And so I still needed therapy and stuff. And so I was doing as much as I could on my own. And then eventually my wife got me with therapists that I work with now. I go to therapy twice a week and I do my exercises religiously. I want to feel the wind in my face. So I'm working my butt off. I want to ski with my kid. I want to snowboard. So it's been this journey back. And, I don't think I'm special by any means in that aspect. And I don't want to go really much further into it other than right now I have the most incredible therapist. I have such incredible support from my wife, my son, my close friends. I will touch on the fact that your intro was that, I don't want to give people hysterics. I don't want people to stress over what I'm dealing with. It's one of those things that I think most people, when they're faced with any sort of health issue, it's like, man, I got to not take the attitude of, hey, I don't have time for this. And I really got to stop and focus. And it takes about 48 hours before you can deal with kind of that first initial blow that feels like you were watching butterflies and someone just came up and just gave you a good punch to the stomach. It's overwhelming. So with the nerve damage, though, where I'm at right now, and the promising side of that is that, and everything else is I have to back up a little and tell you that my oncologist was also really into doing a blood test and finding out if this was all genetic as far as colon cancer. And it is. 100% it is. And so being a dad, that shit scares me. I have colonoscopies annually now. I'm in a good place, but it's always going to be like, is that coming back? It weighs on you. That's why I don't want to talk about it sometimes, and more often than not, and just kind of move forward that I'm healthy now and very lucky and fortunate that I was able to have that access, because not everyone has that access. So, I'm very blessed.
So it sounds like right now, while the cancer will always be something that you have to think about and monitor, you're in a good spot. With the nerve damage, is that something that you're going to be able to ski in the next few years? Do you see the light at the end of the tunnel with that? Because I know that's something that you've been really striving to get back to, because that's your happy place, is being on the mountain. And when your legs don't work, it doesn't really make sense to be on the mountain. When are you going to be able to go back up?
I'll tell you, man, I get giddy right now, and I kind of almost don't have the words. Is that about a month ago, my therapist is like, I don't think, really you should really think about skiing first. I think we should keep going with this balance thing and kind of finding our center. And I mean, pal, 14 months ago, I was using a walker, so I've come a long ass way. And my therapist says, hey, why don't you go cross country skiing? I'm going, you know what? That'd be a good idea. And, unfortunately, my mom passed away 3 weeks ago.
Oh, sorry to hear that, man.
That's all right. And I appreciate that. But what I did was, the day after, she passed away on Saturday evening at 7:20, something like that, 7:20. And my wife and kid were up at my house in Tahoe, and we live in the Bay Area in a little town called Piedmont. And so my mom was in the hospital where she was a charge nurse in Auburn, California. And so, after she had passed, I went and stayed with my mother and father-in-law, but I drove up early to Tahoe the next day because my kid was ski racing. But I went out and just grabbed my cross-country gear and just herringboned up little papoose, or I forget the name of the chair. They've renamed everything so much. But I just went out in the meadow and did a lap, and just, it was my first time around the mountain in like almost 4 years. So it was good to just do that. But where I'm at now is I'm actually going to go get fitted this weekend. The guys from Atomic, Chris Tiller and Martin Lagaza, are going to get me, I'm going to do pro form with these cats, but they're going to get me new gear. I'm getting like intermediate gear because it's just going to be groomers to start with and see where we're at.
Sure.
There's no other expectation than getting wind in my face, maybe taking some runs with my kid and going from there, So it's like, I don't want to blow it and have too high of expectation, but I'm feeling pretty strong and, I've been putting in the work.
Well, that's awesome, man. And during all of this, I mean, you have a business that you started building in Tomahawk International, and you're putting all of your time into building the brand, it seemed like. And then the sickness comes around, and I'm guessing it's being sick, not COVID, that really slows everything down on the brand building side. What's going on with the brand now?
Yeah, you nailed it. It was 100%. And when you are the captain of your ship, you have to wear a bunch of different hats. And sometimes there aren't enough resources or time to delegate to people that, can pick up the slack or that you trust. At that time, the craziest part was I was getting a lot of unsolicited offers to buy the brand, to be a partner in the brand. It was crazy. I was overwhelmed by it, and the people that were approaching me, I had to sign a bunch of NDAs, and a bunch of stuff is still on the table. But when it's all said and done, I had to go get healthy or it would be all for naught anyway, right? So I told most everyone I'm going through some health issues and I'm learning about it all the time. I'm dealing about it all the time. And when I get healthy, hopefully we can reconvene and talk about this and go from there. And so it's already been happening. I've already chose my path back to eventually Tomahawk's relaunch. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You had shit to do and you had to figure out your life before you could figure out your brand. And now it's time to get your brand back on track.
Yeah. I mean, it was so disheartening because it was like my Black Irish luck, which, I did my 23andMe. I am 94.5% Irish. And so I was like, God, I worked so hard to get to being acknowledged like that, or at least having the possibility of people being interested in the brand outside of just the clothing, right? And the partnership and do all that. That was a real big blow. But like I said, it was the fact that I had that interest made me stay the course and know I was doing something right. We had a phenomenal team of athletes at one time, and man, I did the best I could out of my back pocket. And even some of those guys contributed. And it takes that. It takes a village to launch a brand like this, So, it was maybe the first rendition or the first coming of Tomahawk is what you've seen. And we're right around the corner from the second.
And before you can start to build the second, you need to be started and built. And life for you, does it all start in Sacramento and then you're raised in Tahoe City? Because that's kind of what I found in my research.
Exactly. So I was born in Sacramento. My parents were really into the mountains. And then eventually my father worked for Standard Oil, which is Chevron, and he was the distributor for Northern California for oil for production. If you have a farm, tractors need oil and gas. My dad's company would come out and provide that for you. And so we eventually moved up to this town. My dad's business was growing that it was not only doing Sacramento, he was going to take over all of Northern California. So we moved to this town called Loomis, and a little bit of culture shock, but we moved up, adapted, and we were still into going to the mountains, as a family. And so I was really into it more so because I had a couple kids. I'll mention their names as Greg Morrow and my best friend David Wessel, who's not here anymore, rest in peace. They were going every weekend. So I caught a ride with either one of those guys every weekend. And so it was like I was so lucky to have friends who were into it as well as I was. And my parents never quibbled about lift tickets or cost. They're like, go for it. And so when I got to Loomis, I was into all sports. I was really heavily into skateboarding. And my buddy David was as well. Greg, not so much. And I had another buddy who passed away as well, Brett Wilson, who every once in a while he was in the mix, and he was a really good skier. And so it was always fun to have those guys, whether we went to Boreal or Heavenly or Squaw, which is now Palisades, Homewood, any of these places. It was just, I knew I just couldn't get enough of it. It was 4:00 came around and it was like, God, I wanted to go back in time when 4:00 came around. I didn't want to go home.
No, and I've heard rumors, and I don't know if this is true, so this is why I'm asking, that you're part of the J.P. Morgan banking family. Any truth to that?
No, not at all.
Because if you were, I was going to ask about your tennis and golf game, because I hear they're both really good, and that made sense when I thought about J.P. Morgan. But is it true that you have a great tennis and golf game, or is that just shit I heard that is not true?
So, yeah, when we had moved to Loomis, my parents were part of this Sierra View Country Club, and that was like my babysitter during the day. So they would drop us off in the morning, and we would literally do tennis and golf lessons all day, all summer. And so we would get done with tennis. We could go hang out at the pool. We'd get done with golf. We could go hang out at the pool. We had a 423 was our code, so I could charge everything. I guess when I look back at it now, it was totally spoiled and I got everything I wanted. So yeah, I did the player ability test and shot even par for 2 rounds in one day and got the beginning, I guess, sanctions of getting into the PGA.
Huh.
And then I could probably roll out of bed and be like a 5-0 player when I was healthy. But all of that, was something to do in the summer. And there was a time I pushed all that away because it wasn't cool. Skateboarding and BMX were cool. Golf and tennis were lame, and I didn't want people to know about my art and my golf and my tennis. So there's a lot of stuff I kept close to my chest. But I think what maybe gave me my work ethic, pal, was when I turned 12 and I got to go to Mount Hood and, I got to go to this guy, Mike Annette's camp. He's still up there. And I was telling my parents, yeah, I want to start really getting into ski racing. It was went up there. I think it was a little over a week, my first time away from home, first time going to camp. And I came back from that camp, and that was almost the beginning of the end of my ski career. My father's alcoholism had gotten so out of control that he had blacked out, punched my mom, and I get home, I'm unpacking my bags with my friend David Wessel, and I'm dragging my bags up to our back deck, and my mom comes out and she's got glasses on, and I'm like, my mom never wears glasses. What's up with this? And she pulled her glasses off, and my mom had a black eye, and it hurt me to no end because I just felt the pain for my mom, who was my greatest champion, always, the one let me go to camp and all that stuff. And there she is with the black eye. So my mom explained what happened, and man, that was it. My parents got a divorce, and there was no more country club. There were no more e-tickets to the mountain all the time. There was going to be a lot more frugal of times, right? But during all of that, I always know how good and great the mountain made me feel. So I was always, even though I couldn't be up there on a daily basis, or man, I think I didn't even ski after that for maybe a year or two until high school.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start with the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been supporting this show for over 5 years, and they support all the best in ski, snowboard, and bike. From a world-class team of athletes to standalone movies to supporting the most important events, 10 Barrel has deep roots in action sports. Product-wise, 10 Barrel not only brews the tastiest beers in the Northwest, their beers are arguably the tastiest in the country, and they also make the best seltzer on the market with their Clean Line seltzers, and their craft cocktails in a can pack a punch. And it should be known that if you want to enjoy any of their amazing products, do it outside, because that's what 10 Barrel wants you to do, drink beer outside, because that's where they play. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and support the brand that supports the sports we love. To find out more, head on over to 10barrel.com. My next sponsor is Elan Skis, and I'm sure you've been noticing more and more Elan products on the hill lately. I have too. The brand is building a cult-like following because once you ski a pair, you'll realize how much better a ski built by skiers in the Slovenian Alps performs. Don't take my word for it though, demo a pair and you'll feel the difference. My Ripstick 86 and 106s have made me a better skier, and I know Elan Skis will make you a more confident and more powerful skier because great product really makes a difference. On top of that, there's something to be said for quality. And next time you're at your local shop, take a close look at all the skis finishes, and it's visible how much better Elan skis are made. If you can't get to the shop to check those out, head on over to elanskis.com to find out about all the amazing products they offer. My final sponsor is Alpine Vans, and guess what? There are no more Alpine Vans for you to buy. While it's a bummer that the best sprinter vans on the planet are no longer available, don't worry. Alpine has huge plans, and next fall, it will be easier than ever to own the adventure mobile of your dreams. While I can't share the details with you yet, I can direct you to the Alpine Vans site, where you can check out Cody Townsend's video, which will show you the functional attention to detail that is put into every inch of an Alpine build. So head on over to alpinevans.com to see what I'm talking about. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Does the divorce make you rebel against everything and just get you generally pissed off about life?
In a way, yes, of course. I mean, I was such a competitor. Any sport I did, I was, all in. But yeah, there was a bit of a chip on my shoulder because your world comes to an end when you're that old, and they don't do it anymore, but you're literally in divorce court. And who do you want to go with, your mom or your dad? The minute you choose one side, there's a division drawn in the sand, right? So the dissension amongst the ranks about our whole family was everyone just started going their own way. So I'm just about entering high school at the time. My mom works at the hospital 2 to 11. I go to school from 8 to 2. Where was the supervision? So I started, just not having an adult in my life anymore and not anymore. My mom was always there, but not having my father there was that was a big letdown.
So is that kind of when you let go of the tennis and golf lifestyle and kind of pick up the skateboard and cigarette lifestyle?
I've never smoked a cigarette in my whole life, which I'm very proud to say. My mom and dad smoked, and I think it drove me so crazy that I despised those things.
Or maybe the skateboard and weed lifestyle?
Yeah, weed wasn't even there yet. It was really, I was always into skateboarding. And one of the things that came out of this was that my mom asked me, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go to this place called Del Mar Skate Ranch down in Southern California. And at the time I was reading music magazines, and there was this thing called the World Music Festival, and it was going to be a 2-day concert. And the first day was going to be headlining by Van Halen and Aerosmith. And it was right before Van Halen 2 came out. And then the next day was going to be Ted Nugent and Cheap Trick. And I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. And my mom was all in. She's like, yeah, and then I go there, the Pepsi skateboard team is putting on a program. I was like, wow, I want to be here all the time. I love skateboarding. I went to Del Mar. I was so intimidated, but by the time I left there, I'd left a lot of skin, but I'd learned a lot. And I was into it, but there weren't a lot of places like that. There weren't a lot of skate parks. And then eventually, this girl I went to high school with, Tracy Ding, rest in peace, her father built this skate park in Sacramento called Skateboard Palace. And all I had to do was get there. And so I really just kind of lost myself into skateboarding. I just really dug that sport. It's so incredibly hard, but it can be so rewarding when you do things right. And when you don't, it's humbling. It hurts.
And what era of skateboarding is this? Because you're a little bit older than me. I mean, is this like the Z-Boys era of skateboarding or a little bit after?
No, it's really, Tony Alva was God to me, right? I mean, I thought Tony Alva was the bee's knees. The way he was promoted and just so rebellious and just the long hair, the whole nine. I was always influenced because he was the epitome of style to me. I wasn't into surfing. I didn't know about surfing that much yet, and I would go on to get into it. But in skateboarding, Tony Alva was the shit. And he just was, I think, a role model that maybe at that time I latched onto and just bought into. And I was so influenced by it.
That era too, I mean, I've seen the movie Dazed and Confused, and it's like late 70s, early 80s, and it just seemed like a totally different world. You came up in that. Does Dazed and Confused, is that an accurate representation of like your freshman and sophomore year of high school?
Oh, nailed it. It's like amazing how that was, and it was going through that period too, that I was always influenced by music and art, and punk rock was just starting to peek its head around the corner. I had a couple friends who were really into it. And so my skateboard friends were more influenced by the punk rock side, where my other friends I went to school with were just more on that Dazed and Confused look side. So it was like I was always influenced by music. I can listen to anything. I have my preferences, but it's always been a great motivator for me. I've taken so much from it. It's given me so much. I mean, can't say enough about how much I dig music.
At this age, you've got music, you've got skateboarding, but another big thing that every kid has to do is school. And for you, I would think school absolutely sucks because it sounds like you're dyslexic. Back in the 80s, they didn't know anything about dyslexia. I think if you told them you couldn't read or you're reading backwards, they just thought you were stupid and they'd put you in like another class. Did that make school and everything a total challenge for you?
100%, because I really didn't feel like I was going to get past 12. I had a bunch of concussions from BMXing and skateboarding, and I was just diagnosed dyslexic. And then 6 months later, I was really having a hard time with like panic attacks. And my parents were thinking, my mom was thinking, oh, he's just having bad dreams. Well, it was more than that. It was fully anxiety ridden, where I was having trouble being around people in general. And when you go to high school, you're just subjected to so many people. And I was diagnosed agoraphobic. So I'm like, I'm dyslexic and I'm not dyslexic. And then I'm agoraphobic and yeah, I'm not agoraphobic. I couldn't even really pronounce the words. And so it was something that in time, I had to grow to learn to deal with. And with my dyslexia, I could read from the text, but I wouldn't understand it till a week later it would come to me. So when it was time for the test and everything, I would be drawing blanks. And then we've moved on to the next subject, and then it would just eventually present itself. I kind of have this crazy bit of total recall, but it's not usually when I want it. I think everyone's like that, but like I'm a total nerd. I played Jeopardy almost every night, and my wife and I go at it. But it's just like things like that. Why I guess got such a voracious appetite for reading was that, they used to say, don't read with your lips. Well, when I would say the word, I would comprehend it more, right? And when you do things on the practical basis with your hands, you understand it more. I guess at least that's how I worked. So that was really tough. And so that made school really hard for me.
Does it make you act out and just be the kid that's getting in trouble and being a class clown because you didn't want to focus on school?
Yeah, there was definitely that side of it, but then it was more truancy for me. Like we had a couple extra vehicles and at 15, I would drive to Boreal. I don't even have a permit. It took 50 minutes to drive up to Boreal to go ski. And so days I would feel like a little bit of my agoraphobia coming on. I didn't want to be around anyone, and I would just freaking go do what my mind told me to do. And that was a little bit of therapy, go to the mountain. And so I had a big problem with truancy. In fact, the original high school I started at, Del Oro, I didn't even graduate there. I graduated or got my diploma after the fact at this school called Placer, which is in Auburn. So I went to night school to get that, but it was in the summer, so didn't jack with my skiing or anything.
And speaking of your skiing, you get back into it, you say, in high school, and you're stealing the car and going up to ski as well. This is like the early to mid 80s. Do you ever get back into ski racing, or are you just skiing recreationally and having fun?
No, recreationally and having fun and being a rudderless ship, man, just really enjoying powder days and being in the environment and kind of being a little more carefree about it. And that was it. But the people I was skiing with were all gnarly, and a lot of them were racers, right? And so when you start skiing at that level, and then they're starting to go like, dude, you should get back into it. And you're like, nah, it's just too expensive, right? That was always an issue. And so I just got some friends that eventually were into it like I was. And I moved out even before, I was like done with high school. I was like, I'm out of here. I know what I want to do. And people would say, what is it? And I'd be all, I don't know. I'd be all, it's got something to do with skiing. And I don't know what it is right now, but my North Star was just pulling me to the mountain. Inexplicable.
When you're at the mountain at that time, especially where you are in Northern California, snowboarding starting, I mean, it's happened on the East Coast, it's happening on the West Coast. Do you remember the first time you saw a snowboard and were like, holy shit?
Yeah, Boreal. I saw a guy on, I'm not sure if it was that first Sims model, the yellow one that had kind of the like skateboard
on top
of it. Yeah, I think it was kind of that one. And then I saw Winter Sticks. And then my friend Mark Analik from Tahoe was the first one to really like, dude, you got to come check this out. And so the first day I went and watched him, and he had a Winter Stick, and it was nothing more than two little rubber things that he slid his sorels under.
Sure.
And it went over like the tops of his feet. And he wasn't going to let me ride it either, because he's a fear of me like fucking stacking and breaking it or something, So that was my first inclination. And then my older brother was into it for a minute, and I dabbled in that, but I never really had anyone show me anything just other than farting around, kind of toying around on it. But I really wanted to just ski. And I was just like not into it at the time, and I was still into skateboarding. But my friend Tom Burt is the one who really got me to like get back into it and just go for it. And that was, early 80s.
Yeah, and I would think the big event that happened back then was there was the Soda Springs event that seemed to like bring all the snowboarders together on the West Coast for the first time, and it let everybody know that there was a community and there was a lot of people doing that. Were you at that Soda Springs event?
No, not at all. That was the other thing about the events and shit. I would overamp. It was like trying to analyze everyone, friend or foe, and I was still trying to get a grip on who I was and be able to maintain out in public. So I really didn't do anything like that, because every time I rode, pal, quite honestly, it was therapy, man. It was so for me, and it was very selfish, but I don't think anyone could relate how much it meant to me, So it was like I couldn't really share it with everyone because maybe everyone doesn't appreciate it like I do. And I learned that early on, that you get what you get out of it, and to each their own, leave everyone else alone, let them do their own shit. People want to go up to Soda Springs and compete at the World Championships. And there was no real organization then. That was really loose-knit, thrown together, and people picked up the phone and called each other, hey, you can stay on my floor. But I watched it all from afar. I knew every single player, Terry Kidwell, Bob Klein, Keith Kimmel, Alan Onberster, Minnie Sean Palmer, So it was like, yada, yada, yada. They're all people from kind of the neighborhood.
Was that all like your skate crew as well? Like when you go skate in Tahoe City, that whole crew that you're talking about, they'd be there as well?
That's where it all derived from, quite honestly, because this guy, Mike Chantry, had this skateboard ramp up by the high school off Polaris. And it was called Mile High, and it was really something else. And I would go there when most people would leave late at night. I'd ride my BMX bike there. it was kind of had to know someone to not get hassled there. But then it became real wide open. They eventually had a couple pro contests there. I remember distinctly the first one was won by this guy, Billy Ruff. The second one was won by Lance Mountain. I remember I caught an Uncle Wiggly skateboard that day, and my friend Andrew Scheimer threw a dead cat, and it was just like this historic event. And Andrew was a pro snowboarder, probably hates the fact that I just mentioned his name and told that story, but that's where we used to hang out, and you cross paths with all those guys who are legends now. And they're all my friends, but back then it was like no one knew anything. You're just another dude out there.
But as time went on, those names became the future of snowboarding, or the present at that point, and then the future of snowboarding and the legends that we talk about now. And the guys that you were hanging with, they were all made for stories, I feel like. And I'm just going to throw out a couple names, and this is probably a couple years later than we're talking, but I'm just going to paint the picture of the personality of snowboarding compared to skiing. And yeah. I hear you've got a great story with Farmer. He used to run through sliding glass doors or something like that.
Yeah, well, I met Farmer and Nick Parada the same night out in front of this place. I think it was called Pelican's Pier. It was this bar out in front of the restaurant, and they just moved to town from Breckenridge. Farm was on fire from the minute. Nick was just such a great bro. We clicked immediately. When we're out drinking, no one gave a shit. We had this other bar called Humpty's. We almost just owned it, in fact. But yeah, we all had this kinetic energy once we got around each other. And it was like everyone push each other to who could be the biggest idiot and how far we could push it. And, way before the Jackass scene or Dude Sons or all that stuff, there were no GoPros. So it was just like you were just showing up at that moment to do something wacky in front of your friends more often than not. Man, it was just live for tomorrow so we could go ride again. It was a very simple life, and then the sponsorship stuff started to grow. And man, I watched snowboarding from its infancy blow up to what it is today. I'm stoked to see it. I'm glad that skiing's still kind of coming around, but a lot of work to do there.
All right, so you got to tell us about Farmer running through sliding glass doors.
Okay, so Farm went to this party once, and it was a huge house party, and there was this closet, and somehow he found this motorcycler's leathers, like the pants and a jacket and the helmet.
Okay.
And as the party went on, he put that shit on, and he freaking, one of those times I was just talking about up in the ante, he just sprints towards the sliding glass door and just goes right through it. This motorcycle helmet and leathers on, right? Picks himself off the ground and runs back through it the other way.
And breaks both sides.
Yeah, Farmer's a cyborg, man. He really is. He's one of the most incredible snowboarders. He's incredibly strong, but he's out there, He's my bro for life. I love the guy.
Okay. And then I hear there's another story about Andy Hetzel and a bubblegum machine.
Now, that one is gnarly because it really almost got out of hand. And yes, there used to be this big show called the Action Sport Retailer Show in San Diego. And we always go down to stay with our friend Michael D'Amico, who owned this surf shop called Soul Supply. And it was right down by the boardwalk where all the rides and stuff are. And then he had this crazy house that the architect was the same guy who did all of the chart house, which had this crazy design to it. So anyway, we're at ASR, and the party that night is going to this place called Chillers. And Chillers is, imagine, you can order any drink you want, and it comes out of a Slurpee machine, right? So you get a Jack and Coke, Slurpee.
Danger.
Yeah. And so Andy walks up to the bar and says, I want 80 Jack and Cokes. And the guy just looked at him. And the guy was kind of glaring at him, and Hetz just fucking pushed the card right in his face. And he's like, I'm serious. I want 80 Jack and Cokes. And so the guy just started pouring them, right? And we have everyone saddling up at this bar. And man, before we know it, it's later on that night. They're kicking us out. We're crazy drunk. And Andy's just blind drunk. So I'm walking out next to him, and we get to this hallway. And at the end of this hallway is this giant gumball machine. And he just eyes it like a bull to the red cape, and he just bolts. And I'm like, what? And he's literally sprinting, puts his head down, and just hits the gumball machine square. It breaks the gumball machine. It bucks him back onto his butt, probably knocked him out for a second. And there's gumballs flying everywhere, right? We're just like, what was that? Well, it didn't take too long before the bouncers were starting to pummel him, and he was going to get really worked. And I was like, you guys, come on, man. The guy just spent like a couple $1,000 here. Chill out. He's blind drunk. And this guy just like ropes me around the neck too. And so I'm like, oh shit. So he and I get drug in the back, and they cuff us. We're in this, like, I don't know if it's like the kitchen area. It's like this little side area, right? But there's a door that goes out to the boardwalk that's on the strand there. That's how close this is to the beach. And Andy's all, Jimbo, you see that door? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, we're going to make a break for it. And we're in cuffs. Do you see the size of the guy on the other side of the door? And he's not comprehending any of it. He's not having it. And so he stands up, and that guy just opened the door and he sat back down. And so they came up to us. They said, listen, whatever that thing costs, charge it on that card right there and let us go. And the guy was like, all right. And so I think he put like $500 on Andy's card. And he goes, you're going to walk him out of here? And I'm like, just take the cuffs off. We're out of here, bro. You'll never see us again. Takes the cuffs off. I walk Andy out. We get outside, pal. There's like 100 people all chewing gum. Everyone reached into that freaking gumball machine but me and him. And yeah, it was another funny drunk party night down with the boys.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start out with the Seattle brand that has been around since 1913. I'm talking about Stanley, and they invented the category of keeping things hot and cold. Sure, there are a ton of overpriced copycats out there, but no one delivers the quality and, most importantly, the ability to keep things hotter or colder for longer than Stanley. I use the water bottles and pint glasses on a daily basis, and on weekends, their food storage solutions are perfect for all the foods you bring to eat at your local ski area. And while I know this won't last forever, the best deal you're going to find on any Stanley products anywhere comes through my podcast. I'm going to save you 30% off everything Stanley. All you need to do is go to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the one-word code DRINKFAST to get that deal. If you spend $75, I'll throw in a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. My final sponsor is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and if you haven't noticed, Peter Glenn always has something amazing going on their Instagram channel. This week is no different. It's Peter Glenn and Hoka. They're teaming up to reimagine the run and give away a pair of the brand new Hoka Kawana running shoes to one lucky winner. The new Kawana continues to push the boundaries of Hoka foams and geometries, and it delivers an incredibly well-balanced and versatile ride. Entering the contest is easy. First, go to Peter Glenn Ski and Sports on Instagram and follow Peter Glenn Sports and Hoka. Second, like the giveaway post from Hoka. Third, tag 2 friends in the comments. It's that easy. The giveaway ends on March 25th and the winner will be announced then. Good luck, and if you're looking for any Hoka products or any ski or snowboard products, head on over to peterglenn.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. The last story I'm going to ask you about, drunk, crazy story. What's your best Palmer story?
It would have to be the time I wasn't drunk. I was driving his bus for him during the bike tour because his original bus driver had too many DUIs. So the bus isn't moving until someone gets out here. So Bob was his agent. I was his manager. They fly me out. I drove that bus during the performers tour. So I had a little bit of bus ingenuity going on in my skills. So we're leaving Massanutten, Virginia, and we're going to make our way home. And we have this guy, Steve Pete, with us. And it's mid-afternoon, and Palm's been getting into the Coors Lights. And so we got to stop for provisions. And we stop in this town, Rockport, I want to call it, in Virginia, park the bus. It's like a modern grocery store. Well, I'm filling my cart, and Palmer's showing this kid, Steve Pete, who's like a world champion mountain biker.
Yeah, I know who the guy is.
Yeah, so he's showing him how to do whip hits. So they're over at the whipped cream section.
Oh, just doing it in the store?
in the store, and then bringing all the dead cans and throwing them in the shopping cart, right? Well, then Palm's got whipped cream all over his face. So if you watch in the Miserable Champion, there's a part where I'm actually smart enough to have one of the first little mini cams, and I have it in my pocket. And this sheriff came in there, and he was not having it. The store owner wasn't having it. And so they arrested them right there, right? Not only did he arrest them there, but the next day we leave, we're drinking. Well, he's drinking, I'm driving. And he gets so loaded. Now he's naked, and he's like, you know how little dogs and cats get on the dash or in the back window?
Yep.
That's Palm in the front of this bus. And I'm driving the highway, and they got this tattooed naked guy just sprawled out. He's showing his junk. There's a million stories with him, you know, but that was just the one where I was actually sober, and I wanted to strangle him. I wanted to open the door and just kick him out, but
It was his show.
I had to deal with it. But yeah, there's been plenty. With Holmes, same thing.
So snowboarding has all of this personality and fun. What was skiing like at that time?
Oh man, it was like all these people were peeling out of the East Coast and coming west. So it was like the invasion of LL Bean. Like Scott Schmidt was here, and he's from like Idaho, I think. And then this guy Tom Day showed up, and he was from Vermont. And after him, the Egan showed up, and then eventually the Deloriers. And so there were a lot of Vermont plates at Squaw. And it was like a place where you could actually get some pictures taken and get sponsorship outside of being like the U.S. ski team guy, right? So it was like people were being entertained on going to Warren Miller. Greg Stump was just on the verge of about ready to be introduced and change the face of skiing. And Squaw itself, or Palisades, I don't know how should I refer to that now?
Thinking of back then, I mean, you can call it Squaw. We know it's Palisades these days, and you're not meaning any offense to anybody when you refer to it as its old name.
Yeah. So it was competitive in nature because your line spoke for itself, right? I mean, that was your autograph for the day, and not everyone could ski that line. So if you went up and busted something out of like the light towers or up on the Palisades itself, you started to get noticed, you know? And if you wanted to maybe shoot with Larry Prosser or Hank DeVray, you started paying your dues, maybe carry their pack for them. And then there became an avenue for people to start to travel. And so that became real interesting as opposed to just like saving up, buying your season's pass, pay your rent, and do all that so you can rip all season long. Now there's actually, wow, there's a potential here to just ski and get some sponsors. This is interesting because people were sending it out of the Palisades at this time, pal. And it didn't matter where you were from. The great equalizer was, did you land or not? Right? And if you landed a bunch, you started to get a reputation as a total badass. And there were plenty of those people around.
So you and your skiing, though, there still is an organized aspect to it, because one day you're coming home from summer school and you see some dude unloading these huge skis out of his truck, and you stop to ask him if he's a ski jumper, and he lets you know that, no, dude, I'm a speed skier. And was that all it took to get you interested in going fast like that?
You know, I had seen it at Squaw quite a bit, actually, and I really had never been that up close other than people coming by me in line. And at that time, too, pal, guys used to show up in full, like, speed suits and stuff and hike up Palisades and just send it down Main Chute down into the public at, 90, and that was just Squaw. I mean, it was really a place where, you know what, I guess when you say what was it like at that time, I guess I would equate it to how surfers are in their territorial, right? It's like you got to make sure that you wait your turn and you don't drop in on someone. And it's like really hard to people to fathom that shit because it's like, I paid for my pass. What do you mean I can't do this or I can't do that? So you can't be that territorial within that realm of a ski resort, but people were very territorial. And you see it today. I mean, how proud people are to be from that mountain. Go to any other mountain in the world and blows that place away, but still talk shit like it's the best thing since sliced bread.
Right.
I do.
So you've got that localism, but then when speed skiing comes into it and you're seeing people on the mountain doing it, but then you actually see a dude and you actually go talk to him and check out his skis, is it like something where it's like, hey, I like going fast? Like, are you one of those dudes who when you drive your car, at least when you were younger, you drove really fast everywhere because that's just the way you were wired? You wanted to go fast all the time?
Still do. Yeah. And so, yes, I think a lot of it for me is kind of that shit hold my beer by witnessing people do stuff is how you progress, right? And by following people that are better than you, that's how you progress. If you stay in your own little realm, you're insulated. And I was always into pushing it, whether it was like my brother building big old jumps for me to hit on my BMX bike, right? Or going to Del Mar and just like not knowing shit and watching some other kid go up this big wall and going, I think I can do that. Shit, I'll go try that. Squaw very much that emanates in the lift line. You're rubbing elbows with some of the greatest people in the world. Then you watch them take a line, and then what do? I mean, it's like a Warren Miller flick. People watch that and they see someone rip a powder line. They're like inspired by it, and they can't wait to go out and do that same thing the next time they're out there. Well, when that happens on a daily effect and you're out there for literally 7-8 hours a day, just can't get enough. The progression level at that time, it was only one thing you could do was jump, right? I mean, maybe a few people threw a backflip, a couple people threw a front flip, but it was just airing shit out. And there was no real like format for it other than it looked cool.
But on the side of airing things out, this is where the idea of speed skiing starts for you.
Oh, yeah.
And how do you actually get involved in it? Because like seeing big skis is one thing, but getting into it and saying, hey, I want to go 140 miles an hour is a totally different thing. How does it start?
Yeah. So again, influences. You had so much access. For me, I had guys like Steve McKinney, Tom Simons, Paul Bushman, Kenny Volts, Craig Kolonica, George Berland. I had all these guys that maybe, I don't know what it was. I like their skiing. They like my skiing. It's like chasing the big kids around the mountain, right? You got to keep up. And if you don't, you're going to burn it into the ground. And so I started to hear the folklore of Steve, and I kind of knew a lot about him.
And he's just like a legend in extreme end speed skiing. And like, if you look at him, he looks like the coolest guy at the mountain. And he probably is as a personality as well.
Yeah, nailed it. I mean, he was godlike, he was like this mythic creature. And then for some reason, he always had something nice to say when I approached him. Eventually I mustered up enough energy to go up and introduce myself and talk to him. And he was this awesome guy. And I was like, wow, man. And then you really get into knowing how gnarly he was, and he did everything. And I think that's where it was like, it wasn't just speed skiing. I was really getting into snowboarding. I was into telemarking. I was into mountain climbing. I was into rock climbing. I was into just freaking being this like mountain jock, right? But that was just another facet of it. And it was eventually him telling me that he was involved with this thing called the Camel Sprint Series, right? And it was like a recreation speed skiing event. And it was 1984, and it was at Mammoth. And all the scuttlebutt around Squaw was all the big kids are going. Like anyone I talked to, like, yeah, I'm going. And then eventually people were looking at me like, well, you're going, right? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I wasn't going. I had no idea, but then I spouted off that I'm going. And I had no equipment. I didn't have any speed skis. I didn't have a aerodynamic helmet. I had some bent poles. I had a downhill suit and shit, but I didn't have any of the prerequisites I guess you needed. And lo and behold, I'm like literally like a year or so out of high school, year or two, I guess. And I asked my mom, hey, do you think I could borrow the car and go to this event? She didn't even blink. She goes, yeah. And I go, yeah, because I'm going to sleep in the car. And so I went and I showed up. And I remember this as like, I've never done much public speaking, but Tamara McKinney asked me to speak on Steve's behalf because he was such a mentor to me before he went into the Hall of Fame. And I remember when I went to the top of the course, if you're looking at Mammoth and you go up the gondola, there's a midway station and then there's that chair that takes you right to the gap to where the gondola goes over. I don't even know the name of it. Okay. But to the left was where the speed skiing track was. And I remember I was just like standing there and lo and behold, he comes up and I go, dude, what do I do? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I don't know what to do here. And he goes, look, dude, buckle your boots, put your helmet on, make sure you clear your nose so you don't have any snot shit in there, and just skate out of the start. Just tuck and hold it. I was like, okay. And that was what my mentor told me to do. So I went and there were like, pal, there's so many people there. And I ended up getting like 9th place. And it was good to get a good taste like that, right? So I was like, wow, this is easy. And then my first impression was all these guys skiing down to the course are absolutely terrible skiers. So like, I felt like, man, I'm head and shoulders above all these people. So I always had this confidence. And to be honest, most speed skiers did suck. Most speed skiers didn't know how to ski, and they only knew how to go straight. So it wasn't as if I was going to chastise anyone. I was just going to like, well, that's the way you ski. You're not beating me.
I would think a big part of speed skiing is like whoever has the biggest balls and the best wax job, but you need to be able to know how to ski as well, I would think.
Yeah, and I'm not taking anything away from that. You got to know how to ride a flat ski and to be able to leave it flat, where a lot of people start railing in and pronating in. That's when you're riding your edge, And so when you're pronated in, you're riding your edges. It's a little safer. So when your ski's bouncing left to right by 6 inches and you're going 100 plus, 110, 120, 130, 140, how far are you going to ride it flat? How much are you going to send it to the edge? And so, yeah, it was always my intention. I mean, I gave it 110% every time I skated out of the start. I know on NBC they didn't show it, but if you go to the Olympic channel and you just like type in second run final speed skiing 92 Albertville, you go in about 21 minutes or so, you'll see a forerunner. I'm the first guy off the top, and I marched off the top. I skated off the top. Nothing changed from that first race to my last race. It was like, buckle my boots, clear my nose, put my helmet on, and skate out of the start. And I made kind of a speed skiing career out of that motto.
Well, Steve kind of took you under his wing, and I think when he became your mentor, this is a time where you're like selling weed and you're a dirtbag skier, and he kind of changes the whole direction of your life. And when I say change the direction of your life, like, what does the legal age Jimbo look like when he's like partying and hanging with Holmes and Plake and that whole crew when you first meet Steve?
I was already in the bars in Tahoe at 17.
And is this like when you're getting blacklisted and kicked out of every bar in town pretty much just because you're being an idiot and that's what's fun to you guys?
Yeah. And for me, quite honestly, this is where I thank a lot of the people. And I spoke about this too at Steve's memorial, was that at that time, I was like, man, I was just getting away with so much and I wasn't being responsible for anything. And I'm a good athlete if I have direction and structure. And I didn't have that. And I don't know, maybe I was yearning for that while I was acting out, while I was being an idiot. Maybe I was so insecure. Maybe a lot of it was the genetic side of my father's an alcoholic. I'm falling right into the same, I'm supposed to do this kind of thing. And, it takes a lot of soul searching, but it also takes your friends to tell you you're turning into the village idiot. And a lot of my friends were afraid at that time to even say anything to me. And it wasn't until Steve came up and, had a sidebar with me. And there weren't a lot of words spoken, mind you. It was like, dude, you're never going to get the chance to go fast if you keep this shit up. And he just glared at me in such a way that it kind of scared straight. I felt, oh my gosh, I just let down my hero. So it had a lot more impact that it's my hero, my mentor, telling me I'm being a complete douchebag. And I think when you're young like that, only in hindsight do you can really reflect and go, yeah. When you're happening, you're still growing up. And I had a lot of growing up to do. And so that actually happened in 1987. And I'd got in trouble with the law. I'd cracked some dude who had like cracked me at a bar, but he got seriously pummeled. I was paying restitution. The bars were just like, what a liability to have you in here. You're not coming in here. I was a blind drunk, and I look back and they had every right to treat me that way. But there were people, this guy, Tom O'Neill, nicknamed FX, he owned all the bars there. He kicked me out for my own good. To this day, he's like a father figure to me. He's someone that I love talking with, and we're still good friends. And we hang out on Facebook, and I see him up at Tahoe once in a while. And so there were people there that they saw me kind of going my wayward path, but I think they were patient enough to know that, I was probably going to settle down one day.
And it starts with Steve kind of inspiring your change and putting you on the right track. That's 87. By like 88, 89, speed skiing is going to be fast-tracked as an exhibition sport in the 92 Olympics. And where are you when you first hear about that? And you're like, holy shit, I'm going to be an Olympian?
No, I never thought I was going to be an Olympian, to be honest. I just knew that maybe there's a glimmer of hope for me. And from not being able to be a young ski racer and take advantage of that and to maybe live that dream, that maybe, I don't know, I could have this daydream that maybe there's still a path for me, right? And so when that happened though, pal, it was amazing how the competition of like people I really respected, who former downhillers, everyone came out of the woodwork for those spots. I mean, legit US ski teamers, former speed skiers that, former record holders. It was really cutthroat. And so I knew at that time that my forte was the faster events, Les Arcs, Vars, anything that was faster, my results shined above everyone else. If we went to Norway, Sweden, and Finland and we're going 100 miles an hour, I'm with the pack and it's roll the dice. But Les Arcs was a place that was special because I'm there with Steve. He's showing me all the ropes. Dude, get a good book. Don't worry about any of this political shit. Just know what time the first start is and be there. So I had good advice not to get caught up in anything other than focusing on going fast, right? So I think that's when I started to really focus. And backing it up, after that talking that I had, it was literally the next day I took a job. I literally called this guy, Paul Bushman, who was Steve's partner in crime and one of his speed skiing buddies, totally badass from the day, and just said, dude, I need a job. He's like, well, I'm working out in Truckee today. You want to start today? I'm like, yep. And so for 6 months, I worked 6 10-hour days, quit hanging out with the people I was hanging out with, paid my restitution, was working out, and had bought my ticket to Europe. So it was like, didn't see Steve for like 6 months. The next time I saw him was at the post office. And when I saw him, I cowered. I was like, got my mail, and I'm like hitting for the doors, like, I'm out of here. Right when I got to the door, he's like, hey, man, what's going on? And I broke it down to him right there that, I fucked up, dude. And I know I've let a lot of people down, but I'm working for Paul. I'm not hanging out with these people. I'm working out, got my ticket to Europe. And he just smiled. And it was like, we never spoke about it again. So it was like, I had to earn that back, because here I'm kind of neglecting to realize that I've got this access to this incredible human being and I'm just fucking pissing it away.
And you did earn it back because that year before the Olympics, it was pretty much you and him training exclusively at Mount Rose, although I think it had a different name back then. And that was the only place for you guys to train. But in terms of training, the one thing that I think is so interesting about what you were doing was car top training. And while a lot of the Euros and the sponsored athletes could get in wind tunnels and figure out how the wind affects their skiing, you didn't have that luxury. And what was the whole car top skiing routine like? Like, how sketchy was that?
I never did that.
Oh.
I never did that. I never did the wind tunnel. I just went out on DH skis. And the mountain that you were talking about was called Slide Mountain. And so Slide and Mount Rose are now one mountain. But Steve would always talk about, it's the elevation is the parking lot at Mount Rose and Slide is higher than Granite Chief Peak.
Okay.
You're getting out of the car at like 10,000 feet. And he just said that there was this one face back there, and I kind of knew of it, that we can like 5-turn it and no one's going to say anything. And we'd go over there, and he had this little Volkswagen Jetta GTI. Like, our skis didn't even fit in it. Like, we had to like bungee cord the shit down and breathe in the exhaust and shit, but laughing the whole way. And me, I'm just giddy because I'm like sitting next to the dude. And he's like, yeah, man, let's go rip. And I'm just like, are you kidding? Like, I was so honored. And so I think he knew that. And then I would always push it in front of him to like try and ski better. And the crazy thing about that, though, is when he came back and he was racing, I talked to his sister about this, was like, I wanted to beat everyone but him. We didn't know how that equation was going to fall out. Like, we're going to be racing against you. He wants a spot too, And eventually he was older and it wasn't going to happen. And the team formulated as it was. He was going to be the coach. So it ran its course, I guess.
And I'm going to get to my last few questions about speed skiing, and then we're going to go into part 2 next week because there's so much to talk to, Jimbo, and we have an inappropriate question segment that we're going to get to. But there are a few things that were different about speed skiing than other disciplines. And first, what did you wear?
So the material it's a rubberized, non-porous, meaning no air is going to get through it. And the company that made the best was this German company called Eschler. And so this guy, George Pesset, he's still around today. In fact, Jonathan Fletcher is his company, and they make all of the designs and outfits for Spider, for Candide. And they did a suit for my son in Tomahawk. And George was on the Peugeot Grand Prix, which was a former Pro Tour. He was also a ski instructor at Squaw, and he lived with Steve McKinney. So the first year I got to go over to Europe, the first race was in a town called La Clusaz. La Clusaz is where Candide's from, and George is from there. So we walk into the guy's shop, and I'm looking at the guy, and this is small world. And I'm like, oh my God, I got this guy's autograph at the finish corral at Alpine Meadows at the Peugeot Grand Prix. Like, if you're on the Peugeot Grand Prix, chances are you probably signed the bib or the poster I had leaving that race. And so here I'm looking at the guy, and I put it together, and I was like, did you used to race? Oh, yeah. And then Steve's like, yeah, live with me, the instructor, all that. Well, anyway, he's a designer, and so he made speed suits. And so I watched Steve get fitted. I couldn't afford one. I had a hand-me-down suit that I bought from this guy from Taos City. But I watched the process, and then when we went to La Clusaz, I did pretty good. And then we went to Les Arcs, I did pretty good. And I was like, God, I'm really loving this speed skiing thing, but I kind of got to get my shit a little more dialed on the equipment side. So you have leg fairings that you use. That helps break the coefficient and drag behind you, makes you more coefficient. Bent poles so you can get into your lowest form of tuck.
Did you ever use lead in your poles?
I did. Hell yeah, I did. You think about it, it's a little bit dampening. It's something to hang on to, if you will. And I would crumble a bunch of cork, and I would stuff a cork down. I'd get a coat hanger, and I would stuff like bigger pieces, and then I'd crumble cork above it. And then I would just dump lead into it. And you could have up to like almost a kilo of poles. So it's like, 2.2 pounds? And yeah, I did that. I think I had maybe about half a pound under my grips during the Olympics.
And then you have an aerodynamic helmet on top of that, right?
Yeah, and that's probably the most important tool, is that's the leading edge, because we're subsonic, supersonics at point, subsonics bulbous. And you're just trying to break through that wind, let it go over your back with efficiency, and hopefully it's twirling off there. That's why the leg bearings come into effect too. But all of this, the way you're steering it is downward pressure, right? It's downward force. You don't come flying up, because they thought you drop a bowling ball out of a plane, it's only going to go terminal velocity. Terminal velocity was set at 200 kilometers, which is 124 miles an hour. But if something's falling and is slightly aerodynamic, it will fall faster. The terminal velocity shit goes out the window, right? So now you have humans. Steve was the first one to break 200 kilometers. So now it's like, wow, can we go faster? Well, yeah, we start waxing our skis better, and we have better helmets and better leg bearings and, a better suit that air can't grab onto. Yeah, you start going a lot faster. You don't even feel the wind, pal, till you're going like a $110.
And the thing is, you go up to 139 miles an hour, I think, is your fastest. And another difference when you get into speed skiing is like when someone crashes in a downhill, yeah, they can hit the net and they can break bones and tear ligaments, and that can all happen in speed skiing as well. But when you crash at 130 miles an hour, are you just losing layers and layers of skin after you wear through that speed suit?
That's me knocking on wood. I never fell my whole career, pal.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, no, I was very fortunate, but I saw people fall all around me, and I think that's why I worked out. And that was the difference between me, and most people, is I took it very serious, because I had to help a lot of those people home after they fell, right? Those are some of my friends. And shit, I had one buddy literally the year before the Olympics crash right before me, where I had to stand there in the freezing cold for like a half hour in the start gate waiting, and it was just like, ugh. But I was strong. I fought for it, and I'm very fortunate that I never crashed my whole career.
Okay. Well, the last thing that we're going to talk about in terms of making speed skiing interesting, especially at that time, is someone that you knew who was involved in a murder, Michael Skakel. He was a speed skier as well on the team with you. I don't think he made the Olympics, but he was pretty close. And were you friends with him? And what was the whole story around him killing somebody?
Yeah, so I'm great friends with him, and he's an incredible human being. And so, yeah, it's the Martha Moxley murder. Dominique Dunn wrote a book about it called A Season in Purgatory. Mark Furman wrote a book about it as well.
The Crooked Cock from OJ?
Yeah. And so Michael's aunt is Ethel Kennedy. And so there's a relationship through marriage to the Kennedy family. But what really blew it up was people would identify him as a Kennedy, and he's not. And he came from a very wealthy family from Greenwich. And he's a very humble person who went through a gnarly drug addiction to find sobriety in God, and was someone that I just connected with. We had this friendship, and we still do. I mean, I talk to him often. And when Mark Furman put this book out, he had hypothesized that it was not Michael's older brother, who was the first one that was under suspicion, but that it was actually Michael. And then the DA did some real crazy stuff, and he had a famous lawyer. The guy was playing more towards the TV than doing the proper work of putting up a defense, and Michael eventually was convicted. He spent 11 years in jail. I flew out and saw him every one of those years. It was very hard for me, but I'm a loyal friend like that. And before he went down, I even was the only one who would step up for the guy, because I know character. I have good gut instinct, I think. And man, all of our friends kind of bailed out on him at the last minute. And that was for like Geraldo's show for 60 minutes and things like that. And I didn't blink because I believed in his innocence. Well, he had his last chances, or like most people's last chance in law, is habeas corpus. And so he found a great group of lawyers who helped him put on a new legal defense that up until about 2 months ago, the state of Connecticut had a chance to either refile or drop it all. And they've dropped it all. And he's an innocent man, and he's free now today. But he spent 11 years in jail over this, and it was mostly over accusation and innuendo. At that time, he just had a kid. So could you imagine how you would feel? And I know how much your kid means to you and how much my kid means to me. Could you imagine being separated from your kid when it's an infant, and you get put into a jail with legit criminals, and that's going to be your way of life for 11 years? And people are going to send you hate mail, and people are all going to point the finger at you.
It speaks to the character of you, because you were on Geraldo, and I don't know, you're probably on 60 Minutes as well, but no one else would stand up for this guy. The whole country seemed to hate this guy because everything pointed as like there was no other thing that anybody had. They thought it was him, and they thought it was a pretty much open and closed case. And it turned out not to be, but it's pretty cool that you were able to stick by him, and it speaks a lot to your character. And at this point, we are going to pick up the podcast next week, and we're going to talk about the Olympics and the glory and K2 factory team and all that stuff, and grabbing your skis and being the first one to do that and having it documented. But before we get into finishing this show, it's time for inappropriate questions. And I have lined up a special guest to ask you 3 inappropriate questions. He is one of your speed skiing peers from back in the day. I'm talking about Dale Womack. I don't think you've talked to Dale in a while. But Dale has 3 inappropriate questions queued up. Are you ready for the first one from Dale?
Yes, bring it.
How you doing, Jimbo?
Doing good, brother.
The first question is, I was wondering, you could remember how many cheese blintzes you fed Vice President Dan Quayle's dog that morning we were at his house.
The dog's name is Chili for everyone. And I fed it mine. And I didn't know that Marilyn Quayle was right over my shoulder. And I never had a cheese blintz before. I thought it was an omelet. And so when I stuck a fork in it, it was a little too much cheese for me. So I looked around everywhere but behind me. And I know that they had got the dogs from the bushes, from Millie. And so I saw the dog out on the lawn, no shit. And I'm just like, oh, watch this. Chili, come here. And I called the dog, and it ran right up to me. And I just put the cheese blintz on my fork, and I just shoveled it down its throat. And it ran off, and it was just so hilarious because it wasn't a second later. Marilyn Quayle puts her hand on my shoulder and says, I cannot believe you know my dog's name. She was a really gracious lady, but yeah, it was one cheese blintz.
That is pretty funny. And you know what the common denominator in that story is? I went to high school with Dan Quayle's kids, and we always had Secret Service in our high school when Tucker Quayle was a sophomore. And then when he was a junior, he went on to go to a private school because that's what government kids do. But that's inappropriate question number 1. We're going to jump into number 2 from Dale, and I'm going to cue it up right now.
Paso del Stelvio is always everybody's favorite race. I was wondering if you could remember the name of the guy who tore his ass open that afternoon. We were body surfing those little avalanches.
All right, so take us through exactly what happened right there, because when anybody gets their ass torn open, I want to hear the whole story.
Well, just to put things in perspective, Paso del Stelvio is where Hannibal brought over the elephants to conquer Rome.
Okay.
And down below that is Bormio. And up on the pass there, the guy he's talking about was Paul Bushman, one of my heroes, one of my mentors. And yeah, they were up on this ledge and they were getting wet slides going and they were all riding it, having a good old time until they came across some raw rock and it tore someone a new one. So yeah, it wasn't pretty.
And when you say it wasn't pretty and the rock tore him a new one, did it rip through his pants and then just totally spread his butt cheeks and rip his asshole, like literally?
He cut his right butt cheek wide open. And yeah, it went through the garments, everything like a knife. It's like some sort of volcanic rock up there. I couldn't tell you what type, but yeah, the snow turned red and it had a long streak. And you're just like, where's that going? And then you see this group of people. And one of our buddies was drunk with his butt torn open.
I guess I'd call that a shitty experience, or there's plenty of puns to do.
Him, huh?
And we will go with the final inappropriate question.
All right.
How much time was actually spent window shopping in Amsterdam?
How much time is actually spent window shopping in Amsterdam? Not a lot, is my only reply.
All right, and we're going to leave it at that one, because if I make you elaborate on that one, you're going to get mad at me. And I don't want you to get mad at me, Jimbo, because we still have part 2 to do, and that's going to end part 1 of the podcast. But next week, you and I are going to talk a little bit more. We'll get another hour and a half in the can and much more to talk about in the Jimbo Morgan history of life. So I want to thank you for your time on this initial hour and a half, and we will jump into more next week. Thanks, Jimbo.
Thanks, pal. Look forward to it, buddy. Talk to you next week.
So that was time with Jimbo Morgan, and I have to be honest, I had to re-record Jimbo's inappropriate questions. The original ones were from a longtime peer of Jimbo's, and it pissed Jimbo off that I would have this dude ask the questions. And the questions themselves, they were almost belittling Jimbo, even though Jimbo has done so much more on snow than the original questioner. Jimbo was pissed, and he let me know it. So I went with someone else, as I needed to shut Jimbo up so he would record part 2 with me. So we did inappropriate questions with Dale, and Jimbo was really stoked, and part 2 is going to happen, and there's so much more fun stuff to talk about. But that's all next week. For now, I want to thank you for listening. I want to ask you to subscribe to the show wherever you listen, and to rate me. Which reminds me, it's time for the review of the week, and this week it comes from Jonathan. It's a 5-star review, and it's titled 10 Stars. I find the podcast fascinating and compelling. Our 18-year-old son is on the U.S. pipe team. He's been coached by Peter Olenek since he was 9 years old, and he's represented by Jersey. Many, many points of contiguity between your content and our day-to-day lives with many, many common friends. Love the talks with TJ, Simon, Burke, Slopey, on and on and on. Ironically, I didn't hear about you through any of my free ski friends, but through one of my good old friends that I grew up with, Mike Marolt. Mike is Bill's nephew, son of Max. Fancy that. I heard the Powell movement from a crusty old school ski mountaineer, not a saggy pantsed free skier. Mike has been an avid listener of yours for a while, and he's been trying to get me to tune in for about a year. So glad I finally did. Meantime, I can't tell you how fascinating the talk with Bill Marolt was. That was my favorite. Thank you for your unique takes on action sports culture. You're awesome. Thank you for that review, Jonathan, and awesome to hear that your son is killing it and he's on the U.S. team. He's being coached by Peter Olenek, which means he's learning the whiskey flip, maybe on and off the hill, who knows. But really cool that you're able to find the podcast through Mike Marolt, as Mike reaches out to me anytime he likes one of my episodes. And if you haven't read his book or seen his movie, he has done some incredible stuff. And at some point down the line, I'm going to have Mike Marolt on the podcast. I don't know when it's going to be, but it will happen eventually. So thank you very much for that review. If you email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com with your address, I will send you a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. For anybody else that wants a beanie, please review me on Apple Podcasts or any platform, and if I read the review on the show, I'll send you a beanie. To leave a review, here's what you need to do. Hit the podcast icon on your iPhone, search for The Powell Movement, and even if you already subscribe to the podcast, you still need to search for The Powell Movement. Third, click on my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars are. Fifth, give me a star rating and review. If I read that review on the show, you email me, I send you a limited edition beanie. If you live outside of the US, well, you can't really play this because I don't ship outside the US, but what I do is ship to any of your friends within the US. So if you're out of the US, you win. When you email me a friend of yours address from the US and I will ship them a beanie and they can do whatever the hell they want with it. And I thank you for putting in the review. If you're listening on Spotify, well, you can't review me and you're not going to get a beanie, but you can star rate me. So where you see the stars on the Spotify player, just hit 5 stars and you're done with that. It's super easy, takes a second, and greatly appreciated. So thank you for all of that. I also want to remind you to check out my sponsors. Some have amazing deals in their ads. Others just make amazing products, and all of them make this show happen. My sponsors are Stanley, Alpine Vans, Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.